Another Chinese billionaire gets taken in by Chinese police. The UK government is warning people in top positions that Chinese spies are out to get them. And China erects illegal barriers in the South China Sea to keep the Philippines out. And more on this week's China News headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. We reported recently about how Chinese buildings are falling down because they're made from cheap tofu-dread construction. Well, the same could be said for Chinese property developers too. This week, news broke out that the founder of Chinese property developer Evergrande has been put under police control? Sources told Bloomberg that Hui Ka-yan was taken away by Chinese police earlier this month and is being monitored at a designated location. According to Bloomberg, being placed under police control means he's somewhere between arrested and just having tea with police. He can't move freely or communicate with the outside world without permission, and he's had to turn in his IDs and passport. However, he hasn't yet been charged with a crime, and he could be held like this for as long as 6 months without being formally charged. What a wonderful justice system China has. After the news broke, Evergrande shares were halted on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Evergrande was once China's largest property developer by revenue. However, it over-leveraged itself and began to default in 2021. Now there's speculation it might end up being liquidated. Hui Ka-yan, who's also known as Xu Jiayin, was once Asia's wealthiest man. According to Forbes, he was worth $36 billion at the height of his wealth in 2019. Today, however, Forbes puts his wealth at just over $3 billion and Bloomberg at just $1.7 billion. In his book Red Roulette, Hong Kong businessman Desmond Shum describes him as being so wealthy, he was literally burning money. He said Hui Ka-yan once flew his private jet completely empty to Paris so that he could play cards with friends on another jet and still have his personal jet once he landed. I think that gives new meaning to the term high roller. The Philippines this week said it removed a barrier in the South China Sea that China has built to keep Filipino fishermen out. Footage released by the Philippine Coast Guard shows several Chinese vessels policing a barrier near the Scarborough Shoal. Both China and the Philippines claimed the Scarborough Shoal, but China illegally took it over in 2012 and now controls fishing access in and around it. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry claimed that China put the barrier there after a Philippine fishing boat entered waters near the shoal without its permission. The Philippines later removed the barrier. China has claimed about 90% of the South China Sea as its territory with this fancy 10-dash line on their official map. And China is already policing the area like it owns it, including passing laws that says they can shoot you. But an international tribunal ruled in 2016 that China's claims were bunk, and China basically just ignored that ruling, and I'm sad to say, has pretty much gotten away with it. And I thought my neighbor was bad for letting his dog pee on my doorstep. Turns out I should be grateful he's not a maniacal dictator who puts a fence around my door because he thinks it's his. And after the break, the UK government says that China is trying to headhunt British nationals in top positions. Welcome back. The UK government says Chinese spies are targeting British officials in sensitive positions in politics, defense, and business. It says this is part of an increasingly sophisticated spying operation to gain access to UK intelligence, and that it's happening on a prolific scale. This comes after a Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee report that said China had penetrated every level of the UK's economy and that the government had been asleep at the wheel. Either that or they were driving on the wrong side of the road. Britain's Domestic Intelligence Service, MI5, has said it's now running 7 times as many investigations into Chinese activity as it did in 2018. Speaking of Chinese interference, the White House held a summit for Pacific Island leaders this week in an effort to counter China's growing influence in the Pacific. The summit was largely symbolic, basically showing that the U.S. still cares about the Pacific after decades of neglect. But there were some economic benefits promised this year as well. Reuters reported that Biden pledged to work with Congress to provide $200 million more in funding for projects in the region. Although a former U.S. ambassador to Palau said there's a lot of caveat language. He said it's difficult to pinpoint how much real money is going to this, whether it's old money or new money, when it's actually going to arrive in the Pacific, and whether Congress is on board. Sounds like Bidenomics to me. But the money's important because one of the main ways China gets its foot in the door in other countries is through development projects. And if the US and its allies can't find a way to counter China's infrastructure deals, it's going to lose. The US is definitely playing catch-up here. It largely forgot about the Pacific Islands after World War II, relying on Australia to keep an eye on the region. You know, the land down under, where beer does flow and men chunder. That wasn't a good long-term plan. When Solomon Islands signed a secret security deal with China last year, though, the US realized it had to step in. Over the past year, the United States has opened embassies in the Solomon Islands and Tonga, and plans to open one early next year in Vanuatu. Notably missing from this event, though, was the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands. He says he skipped the event to avoid a lecture from US officials about how good they are, and because he didn't see any benefit from last year's summit. This is the second time in the past few months he's shunned engagement with the US. In August, he made sure he was too busy to meet with the US delegation that visited Solomon Islands. However, he did visit the US this week to attend a United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York. At the meeting, he praised China's global security initiative and called China's development aid less restrictive, which I'm sure it is. No need to worry about little pesky things like human rights and the environment. All you have to do is do whatever Beijing tells you to do. Easy peasy. Also notably absent from the White House's Pacific Islands Summit was the Prime Minister of Vanuatu, Sato Kilman. His office says he couldn't attend because he had to be in Vanuatu for a no-confidence vote for his predecessor. As we've reported before, Sato said he might overturn a security deal that his predecessor signed with Australia. That's because it could jeopardize Vanuatu's relationship with China, which is its largest creditor. And as we know, angering China comes with lots of consequences. But doing what China tells you comes with lots of money. And a Uyghur scholar who vanished in 2017 has been given life in prison. Rahila Dawit was an anthropologist who studied Uyghur folk traditions. Friends and family say she stayed away from politics, was a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and received grants for her research from the government. Despite all that, she disappeared after taking a trip to Beijing in 2017. The Duihua Foundation, which helps Chinese prisoners, said she was convicted in 2018 for the crime of splitism. She appealed that conviction, but her appeal was rejected and she's now facing life in prison. While she was supposedly convicted for promoting separatism, if you ask me, her real crime was being a minority intellectual in a communist ethno-state. Just looking different is enough to get convicted in China, and if you're an intellectual, that's 2 strikes against you. China has lots of ways of dealing with dissidents it wants to silence, and there's a video I want to show you about one of the most gruesome ways it does that. But before I do, China Uncensored only exists because of funding from fans like you, who contribute as little as $1 an episode on patreon.com/China Uncensored. I call them the China Uncensored 50-cent army, and as a thank you, I answer their questions at the end of episodes. Today's question comes from Yonman. Hey Chris, just wondering, you think the CCP controls the world already? Oh boy, I think the sad answer to that question is the CCP already has tremendous sway over the world. Obviously, there are countries like Solomon Islands where the CCP has bought influence. But then there's things like American newspapers getting paid to print Chinese propaganda, and American politicians like Gavin Newsom doing some pretty shady things with China. I could say a thing or two about the Biden family as well. Then there's international institutions like the UN. China pulled enough influence to kill an investigation into human rights abuses, which is insane because here's the video I wanted to show you about how the CCP is literally butchering its own people for their organs. Click that video. And your support on Patreon ensures we can continue to uncensor all of it. Yonman, thank you for your support. And if you're interested in supporting China Uncensored, click that orange button. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.